everyone, here I am with my wrap up of my TBR Takedown that I did between the 8th and 10th of April. Actually didn't finish it until yesterday, 12th of April, because real life got in the way. So I did get a little bit behind, but I've done my TBR Takedown and now I'm currently reading my Genreathon books, which I'll give you the wrap up for probably at the beginning of next week. It's a beautiful day in the northwest of England. I've actually had to shut the blinds of my room because the sun is coming through and distorting my picture, which is very bizarre and unusual. It's a day to make note of because it doesn't happen very often. So, back to the TBR Takedown. I really enjoyed doing this. It felt really good to just actually give myself some time to reading, because often like weekends get caught up with household chores and catching up with things, washing, all those boring things, and I just thought, no, this is what I want to do with my weekends and this is what I'm going to do. And I actually managed to get those books that I'd meant to read for ages done, so it did serve its purpose and I really enjoyed taking part in it. The first question or activity on the TBR Takedown was to read a standalone book. So I read A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. It actually looks quite a thin book, but it did take me a little while to get through because the print is really small. And this is an expansion of a talk that Virginia Woolf gave at Girton College, Cambridge in 1928, and it's all about women in fiction. Virginia Woolf shows herself to be really ahead of her time in what she's written here. She's definitely a feminist. She's definitely would fit in with today's idea of feminism. She was really on the money, really, and she was arguing with the fact that history sort of hadn't really got any representation of women, and literature of the past hadn't really got great works by women because they didn't have the independent means or a room of their own to actually go off and do those things, because they were property of men and everything that they owned became the property of men. And so in order to be a creative person you needed to have that financial security and the time basically to do it, you know, your own space, which is something that women didn't have. So yeah, it's well worth a read. I really enjoyed it. It's made me want to read more of Virginia Woolf. I found it a lot more readable than I thought I was going to do. And that also, it's part of the Feminist Orchestra book club, and this is the book that we're reading for this month. So yeah, I enjoyed it and I'm definitely a fan of Virginia now. I like what she had to say. The second activity was to read a book from your most recent book haul, and at the time that was Lobsters by Tom Ellen and Lucy Iverson. So this is a young adult book. It's definitely the format of it is told from the male protagonist and the female alternately, and I think it definitely benefited from having both sexes of authors writing it, because you did actually see differences between the narrators. You could actually clearly see that it was a different person's point of view that you were hearing. Apart from that, I think initially the first half of it I wanted to put it down. I hated it. I wanted to love this book because it sounds like a really fun rom-com, and I'd say the second half of it was more of that. But it's I don't know if this is coming from someone who's got children of this age, you know, just at university or going to university, where the most important thing to them is, bar their A-level results, is losing their virginity. And I certainly feel that there is a lot more to life than that. It's not the be-all and end-all, but that seemed to be the focus of the book. And I just thought, what messages are we giving here to young people? You know, really just get on with life and that'll happen as and when it should happen. So that did annoy me. And I don't know if if I read this, say, 20 years ago, I would feel differently about that. But certainly as a parent, it was just very annoying and I just despised everybody in it. But certainly the latter half of the book, it was better. It did improve. And it was less focused on that aspect of it and more about the characters and that, but still I didn't really love it. It's not a book I would be passing on to my children who are of that age. So yeah, a bit of a disappointment really. I've read it now and it's not something I want to return to. So yeah, so that was Lobsters. The third activity was to catch up on a series. So I read the 9th book in the 44 Scotland Street series, and that is Bertie's Guide to Life and Mothers, and this is by Alexander McCall Smith. This is one of the many series and books that Alexander McCall Smith does. He writes about 4 books a year. He's so prolific, and considering he really does churn them out, there is no lacking in quality of what he writes. I have to say, out of the 9 books that I've read, this was actually one of the better ones in the series. I really enjoyed it, and I mean really enjoyed it. I've always I always call them the Bertie books, because Bertie, the little boy who you can see in the tree, is quite a central character in the books, and he's like the boy who's never allowed to grow up, but finally in this book he is actually allowed to have a birthday, and he turns 7, which he's been trying to turn 7 in all the other books, so he finally does turn 7. That's not really a spoiler. And I always like to have a 44 Scotland Street book in reserve, because sometimes when you just need a hug in a book, that familiar characters where you know it's going to make you laugh, it's not going to upset you, nothing terrible is going to happen, it's just going to be humorous, back with old friends. So I always love to know that I have that there if I need it. So I think that's why I'd been putting off reading number 9, because after this there isn't any more. But book 10 is coming out later this year, so it was okay. So this actually follows all the regulars, and 44 Scotland Street, if you don't know it, is it's sort of like a converted mansion, you know, one of the townhouses in Edinburgh that's been turned into flats, and the residents who live in it and around it who are associated with it. And like I say, Bertie's our little 7-year-old boy who has the most overbearing mother in the world. And he's quite a child genius, Bertie, actually. He's really clever, but you just love Bertie. You just want to take him home and love him, because basically he just wants to be a boy, like any other boy. And then you've got all the other characters, and Cyril the dog with the gold tooth, and yeah, you'll just love them, and it's a really, really good read. Very well written, and yeah, you'll find good friends. So the first one in the series is 44 Scotland Street. So yes, thoroughly enjoyed this one. It was great. And the final one, activity, was to a book that's been on your TBR shelf the longest. I've got books that have been on there for ages, so I'm not entirely sure if this was the longest, but it has been on there a while. And this is the first book that I've got of Barbara Pym. And this is called Some Tame Gazelle, and if you look at the cover, isn't it beautiful? I think I've got about 9 of these, and I don't think they necessarily follow all the same characters, but they're all sort of set around the same sort of time period and place. And these books, this one particularly, it's set in the 50s, in an typical English village, where the church and its parishioners are the heart of the village, and it focuses on 2 spinster sisters, the Mrs. Bede, and there is Hannah, who's a plump, vivacious, outgoing sister, and Belinda, who's a little bit more straight-laced, but and it's their adventures with all the other villagers and the relationships, and there's lots of going to tea with the vicar. And Barbara Pym's writing is amazing. The way she has characters summed up in just a few lines, but you can see exactly that person in your mind and you know them. She describes clothes and food so well, situations. It's humorous, it's love, it's just, again, it's in the vein of Alexander McCall Smith. I'm so glad that I finally picked this up. It all sort of focuses around the new curate that's come to the village, and there is unrequited love, and there's proposals of marriage, and there are the usual bitchy gossip among the parishioners. There's, you know, the overbearing vicar's wife, and, you know, the archdeacon who basically can't be asked to do his job but is such an overbearing windbag in the pulpit, and it's just so funny. But the characters are just, you know, so well drawn, and really good caricatures of what you do see sometimes in this country, and particularly the 50s. So I thoroughly recommend Barbara Pym. She is absolutely fantastic, and I will definitely be reading the rest of them. So that was my TBR Takedown. So on the whole, 3 out of 4 I loved. Lobsters, I'm glad I've read it, because even though I had high hopes for it, as part of the TBR Takedown, it was sandwiched between books that I really enjoyed reading anyway, so I could just quickly get through it and get on to the next one. So yeah, the majority of them were absolutely brilliant. I loved them and I really enjoyed taking part. So if you've took part, or if you've read any of the books that I've read, let me know in the comments below. Let's have a chat, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!